Ed Buchanan, thanks for meeting with the Star-Tribune today.
Good to be here.
We'll get right into it. What would you consider to be the most important part of the Secretary of State job?
Really, I think the most important part would be an educational piece in a couple different areas. First, with regard to getting people involved in the political process as far as registering to vote, knowing how to participate in that process, getting some more people out. And then the second piece of that, as far as education goes, would be get people involved in the rulemaking process. That's one of the biggest things that I'd like to do as Secretary of State is make the public aware of how we promulgate rules and regulations. A lot of folks don't realize they have the same force and effect as law does. And yet we really don't have a lot of participation in that process. It goes through Management Council, it goes to the governor. And I think if we had more citizen involvement, everyone would be more aware of what's government, what we're doing basically, because the legislature gives a lot of authority to the various agencies to carry out the programs on their own by promulgating these rules. And I think the end result that I'd like to see is probably, if I could sum it up, I would say less regulation, and then the regulations and rules that are necessary are one, reasonable, and two, they make sense. They're common sense.
Okay. Membership of the State Loan and Investment Board is a pretty important role for the Secretary of State position. Are you following the work of SLIB right now? And if so, can you maybe discuss some things that they've handled recently that you either agree or disagree with how they've handled?
Sure. I know that there's a meeting most recently that, for example, Torrington's a good example of that. We got some electrical infrastructure funds for a business park. I thought that was a good thing. You know, people ask about, including your newspaper, the Magpul story, and that seems to be a big topic in the race, I suppose, or not just that one, but really the role of SLIB when it comes to giving funds to communities to the extent it may hurt a particular company or industry or help another one. And what I would say to that is, you know, really you have to be there to pass judgment on those things. We've been talking about economic development for a number of decades, really. It's not a new concept at all. And there are a lot of constitutional provisions that allow us to do what we do with the State Loan Investment Board and the funds that are there. Having said that, I think you always have to measure the decisions against the Constitution to make sure that we stay within the parameters of the Constitution, and really that we disperse those funds so that the infrastructure is built, but it's a level playing field for any community that wants to or attract business or business that wants to go to a particular place. So, you know, as far as anything I disagree with recently, there isn't anything.
Okay. More along those lines, let's say you were on the SLIB board and you were going to do a loan or a grant that included a recapture provision. Where should that money go in your mind?
You know, that's another tough one. We were at the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. It's probably been a couple months ago, and that issue comes up. I don't have a real issue with it going back to basically the pot of money so that the community could continue to use that if their project comes in under budget. But I think to make a requirement would be to say they have to have a comprehensive recapture plan in place, because you don't want them to use that money just on anything, because the whole point of the entire program is that they have a plan in place. The plan has passed muster by the staff that the State Loan and Investment Board utilizes to analyze all these projects before it ever gets to the board. And so you want to be able to say, look, they came in under budget. Is there a piece of that they'd like to do that they didn't get to do? But we want to have a plan in place. So if we said, you know what, recapture that money, it doesn't go all the way back to the state. It can stay in that pool of money so that community could use that. That'd be fine with me, but they need to have a comprehensive recapture plan so we know exactly, you know, how it's going to be used. We have the same issue really sometimes with educational funding. And it's a it's kind of a political issue, and it's a tough call because you have, for example, you have the funds that come back to the state to try and make education funding equal from all the Campbell decisions, but then a lot of the school districts want to keep that money because they feel like they earn more of it than others, and it becomes one of those things where a lot of folks say, well, it should go back into the general pool so that other districts, it could be redistributed to them. Or in the case of economic development, like we're talking about here, it could go to other projects from other communities whose project was turned down because there weren't enough funds to begin with. So it's a tough call, but I'd be for that as long as they have a comprehensive plan.
Okay. Besides SLIB, what would you say is the most powerful group or state body that you'd sit on, and why?
Besides SLIB?
Yeah.
I would say the next most powerful probably would be the Office of State Lands and Investments, specifically when it deals with public lands and the federal trust lands. That's another area that there are a lot of stakeholders in. You've got ranching, agriculture, mining. You have the environment, forests, recreation. And then you also have with the mining, the important part of that is the role extractive industries play with the ability to go on federal lands and the FMRs, the federal mineral royalties we get out of those. So I think that's the next most important body that the Secretary of State sits on, and in balancing those different roles, managing those for their maximum possible value. The statute talks about, maximum economic value. And obviously, as you know, probably from researching this, that's how we fund a lot of things in the state, to include your, public education, boys' school, girls' school, a lot of entities like that. So
it's been said that the Secretary of State job could be a stepping stone to the governorship. Do you want to be governor someday?
No, my philosophy on that is quite frankly, a person can't reach for a particular office just because they want to do something like that. I feel like a person is called to public service because somehow in the past, or how you've carried yourself, or the relationships you have with other people think that you would be good at something. They think you'd be good at serving the community. They think you'd be good at public service. And so, in my mind, it's something that people call you to do, and then if you're so inclined and you have the ability and the time to do it, then you consider something like that. But I don't think anybody should ever say, I'm going to be governor. That's something that I think that the people come first in requesting those services of you. Then if you can do it, maybe you accept the challenge.
Okay. And to kind of wrap things up here real quick, there are a handful of candidates. It's a competitive race. So how do you differentiate yourself to the voters? I guess why should we vote for you for this position?
Well, a couple things I'd say. First off, when I came back to Wyoming, I ran for the legislature in 2002, and I was there for 10 years. And so I have the experience of running committees. I was chairman of House Judiciary Committee. I was elected by my peers to be Majority Floor Leader and then later Speaker of the House. I left in 2012. And so I've got the experience, and I've built the relationships and have a rapport with a lot of the entities that the Secretary of State deals with, a lot of agency heads. And where I'm going with this is I feel like I always led when I had the opportunity to lead from a place of civility and respect, such that no matter who I was dealing with, whether it was a different agency, a department, people from another political party or ideology, I always treated them with civility and respect. And so throughout my legislative experience, I think that I worked well with people of a diverse group of people. I think if you ask really anybody that I've worked with in the past, they would tell you that. And I'm very proud of that. And I think that You need somebody who can go right into that office, has the relationships, has the rapport with people, and has already people kind of know what they're getting with me as far as that goes. And I think that's important because people want to deal with somebody they respect, somebody they trust, and somebody who has the knowledge to do the job.
Okay. That's all the questions we have for you. Is there anything you would like to make as far as a closing statement goes?
Yeah, I think it's important to ask the question of any candidate exactly, why they want to run for Secretary of State, and if they were so privileged to be elected, what they would do when they got there. And the simple answer to why I'm running for the position, I know it sounds perhaps cliche in this day and age of apathy towards politics, and people are really jaded. But I would tell people that aside from personal relationships that we all enjoy in our families, serving in the legislature was the single most rewarding part of my life, really. And the reason it was so is because you have a citizen legislature, you have the ability to solve real people's problems, their real problems, and you can do it in a relatively short period of time. Now, we couldn't always solve every problem, of course, but so rewarding to have people come to you with a good idea and carry it forward for them in an effort to make their lives better, to make their government better, to make the state better. And it could be something big. 2003, economic development. I passed a constitutional amendment so that local communities could use sales tax revenues, if they so choose, for economic development. That was a specific idea I had in mind with that. And where else but in a small government and in a place like Wyoming can you get something like that done in 20 days or 40 days, depending on the year? So extremely rewarding. And the second piece to that is I've developed kind of a 5-point plan of what I want to do in the office. And really I've got some specific ideas as far as making things work better for commerce, specifically for banking and agriculture. I think there's some technological advances we can use for the Uniform Commercial Code, effective finance statements, things like that. I touched a little bit on the transparency piece when I talked about rules and regulations. They are in the process, I think, now of funding some of these things, but there's no real good reason why the public can't have greater access and easier access to the rules and regulations. And I think if we do that, I already said, we get a better product. The third thing I'd like to do is be proactive when we start talking about consumer and corporate fraud. Everybody knows that was an issue before. I think they largely have that handled. But I think there's more to do in that area. And the next thing is really I want to be, what I say is I want to be an ambassador for the state of Wyoming. And that goes back to your question about the State Loan and Investment Board. It means you go to every community in the state, whether it's the Bighorn Basin, Weston County, Uintah County, wherever it might be. And government is centralized in Cheyenne, necessarily so because of the capital. But people all over Wyoming deserve a voice on those boards and those commissions, and I want to be their ambassador, the entire state's ambassador to government in Cheyenne, to listen to their needs and concerns and carry those back to Cheyenne, and just like we did in the legislature, take those ideas and their concerns and things and see if we can solve problems, see if we can do good things for the different communities around Wyoming. So that's what I would say in summary.
Buchanan, thanks for your time today.
Thank you very
Best
much.
of luck.
Appreciate it very much, guys. Thank you.